Hello and welcome, independent researchers, skeptics, and all of humankind, to Shadow Citizen.
Welcome to episode 9 with guest Charles Ortel. You can listen to our live broadcast and chat along at mixlr.com/Shadow Citizen. We are also simulcast on radioconfluence.com, and from there you can take us with you on TuneIn and Zeno Live. For a schedule of upcoming guests and for past archives, please check out our website, shadowcitizen.online. And now we have some cool merchandise, so get your t-shirts and coffee cups and that kind of stuff. My name is Rob O'Sell, and my co-host is
Rachel L. McIntosh. We've got a great guest today, and it makes me kind of queasy to even think about this, because last night and the night before, I stayed up and I watched every YouTube video I could, and I read everything that this man has written. He's a Wall Street analyst, and he uncovered massive amounts of Clinton Foundation fraud. He's a frequent guest on Bloomberg Television, and he's a contributor to several different print and internet publications, including the Washington Times. And he began his Wall Street career from June 1980 through July 2002 with Dillon Read and Company, which is where Catherine Austin Fitts worked. We just found that out the other day. Kind of a cool thing. And then he went to the Bridgeford Group and the Chart Group. He went to the Horace Mann School, Yale College, and Harvard Business School. And he spent a lot of time putting together a report about this Clinton Foundation. But anyhow, right now we've got Charles Ortel with us. And Charles, thank you for putting up with us and trying to hook up with us with your phone and everything else. We're dying to hear about this report you did. I had no idea that this was going on and it was this massive. So it's your turn to talk now, Charles. Go for it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me on. So I got into looking at the Clinton Foundation by accident. I'm not really, or I should say, I'm passionately against the idea of partisan political activity. In my earlier years, I probably voted mostly for Republicans, but around about 2001, I began to get less and less enamored of the Republican Party, and I think the Democratic Party in the main, at least the leadership of it now, is out to lunch economically and with regards to geopolitics. So I didn't come at this with a partisan bent. That said, I obviously, when I started looking at this by accident in February of 2015, when I did about a month's worth of work, I realized it was the biggest unprosecuted fraud in history, and that by going down the path that I did go down, it likely would have an impact potentially on the election. So I wasn't, unmindful of the political issues that surround this sort of an inquiry, but I care passionately about charity. And I think it was Montesquieu when he wrote his seminal book about America, when he lived here and was interviewing, so impressed with the American spirit. One of the things that he found distinctive way back when, I think in the 18th century, was our charitable instincts in this country, that, even the poorest among us, somebody else has a problem, we're going to chip in, we're going to try to help remedy unforeseen adversities. And that's over time, given the way America's grown up and the way this country's gotten richer and richer, our not-for-profit sector, some reckon, is about a seventh the size of our total economy, making it alone, just the not-for-profit piece of it, bigger than something like 180 countries in the world are smaller than our not-for-profit sector.
Wow.
And when you get into it, as I did, if you go onto my website, which is simply my name, www.charlesortel.com, there's something called the First Foundation Report that I issued, I believe, on the 20th of April, 2015. And there's an appendix in it that gives people details, the best estimates that the U.S. government puts out, and these are pretty granular estimates, of how much money people spend on charity every year. And then our government estimates, how much do the wealthy spend and how much do everybody else spend. And what you find is that actually in this country, yeah, Bill Gates gave a lot of money away and Warren Buffett gave a lot of money away, but the people who give disproportionately to charity are the bottom 80% of this country.
That's
the
right.
moms, the pops, and obviously a lot of that goes through religious institutions. But when we give money away, we expect the people who are operating charities to be honest. We expect them to truly care. We expect them to refrain from partisan political activity, which is actually illegal in a charity.
Right.
And we certainly expect them to avoid trying to get rich off a charity, which is strictly forbidden. And so when I saw this back in February, March of 2015, and I realized what we had here, I decided this would be an excellent textbook case, how to teach the proper ways to run a charity by showing how badly this thing has gone wrong. Now, little did I anticipate that it would stand at the center of a network of crooked charities. It's
Right.
not simply the Clinton Foundation.
Yep.
There's many other Media Matters. The Gates Foundation, sadly, has gotten itself stuck up in this mess. Multiple other charities are engaging in activity which ordinarily is severely punished, including by sending people to prison for decades.
During the primaries, didn't Trump at one point, want to contribute to the Wounded Warriors, and then he found out that all the money is kind of being distributed at the very top for the administrative purposes, and little of the money is getting to the Wounded Warriors. So, yeah, this is sort of systemic through a lot of the charitable, foundations. And you talked about the reverse Robin Hood effect.
Right. So yeah. I mean, the thing is that what you find out. I disagree with Warren Buffett on a lot of matters relating to investments. I don't think his track record is all that good from 1998 forward. But one of the things I agree with him on, he said that it's actually very difficult to give large amounts of money away responsibly. And the reason for that is that in 2017, governments around the world are big. There's a lot of money that flies all over the world, in theory, to these places that need a lot of help. A textbook case, for example, would be Haiti, that got over $10 billion. No one really knows whatever happened to that money, and Bill Clinton personally was very much involved, overseeing what I think was the looting of money destined to Haiti. So it's tough it's very tough to find people who deserve the type of aid that we can give away on the scale that we give away. And a dead clue that a charity is probably not all it's cracked up to be is when you start seeing it advertising on television. That's expensive. And a good cause does not need a television ad.
Yeah, I agree. Should we start this whole thing with the very beginnings of the Clinton Foundation in 1997? And then how that was, we could start there and then blow it right up to like the ridiculousness with Haiti and India. I don't know if people know about Haiti. They sort of know about Haiti. I don't know if they know about India at all. But the very beginnings of it sounded legit until, so why don't we start in 1997 when they decided to do this?
Okay, well, I would like to just correct you at the outset.
Oh, okay, go right ahead.
That this thing has been a fraud from the day it started. Okay. And if we go back to 1997, I'm 61, so I remember 1997 very well. At that point, my children were both under the age of 10. And so in 1997, I really didn't appreciate having my daughter asking me questions about what was going on in Bill Clinton's White House. And we will remember that what happened in 97 is that early in the year, it became apparent that a fund that had been set up to raise money to pay for legal expenses had solicited money from foreign nationals, which is strictly against the law. And so the first presidential defense fund had to be wound up. That news happened, I want to say, springtime 97. Then around about the middle of the year, the Clintons had been using every argument in their arsenal to try to slow the inquiries in the Paula Jones case. And the Supreme Court ultimately ruled that had to go forward. So just at the time where their troubles began to mount, their ability to tap the public for money to pay for their legal expenses seemed to be constrained by the Charlie Tree revelations. So it was then, by October 23rd, 1997, that they formed this charity. Now, the way, when you go through a charity, it's actually useful to take a second and explain it. The first thing you do generally is you have to create a real legal form. The three of us couldn't get together and sort of in our spare time ask people for money and then give it to a good cause. No, the IRS says you have to have a legal entity. And most people choose what's called a nonprofit corporation. A nonprofit corporation is not a federally tax-exempt charity yet. It's just the legal form you pick. And then you have to fill out this exhaustive application, which I think is actually an excellent document. You lay a marker down in your application. Here you are trying to put a charity together to do good works only. And you must answer the forms fully and completely and truthfully. And if you don't, and the IRS later discovers that you lied or you weren't telling the whole truth in the application, the IRS has the right for the rest of the life of your charity to say, hang on, 25 years ago you said X, Y, and Z. We took you at your word because we can't check everybody carefully, and we discovered that X, Y, Z is actually 1, 2, 3. Something radically different, and the IRS can go back and retroactively revoke the charter. So what happened is they put this application in on December 23rd, 1997. It was approved, I think, on January 28th or 29th, 1998. And the purpose of this thing was and always has been, and there's a very important distinction between the purpose of a charity and its activities. The purpose has to be approved. The purpose has to be charitable. And the purpose of this thing was to be a presidential archive, which is not a memorial to Bill Clinton. It's a building where you house the records created during his 2 terms as president, and a related research facility to have been based in Little Rock, Arkansas. And that's it. That
okay,
is
so it's
all
mostly like it's a building project. That was a building project. And they were going to just keep everything in this building. It was nonprofit because they were doing it as like a favor to the people of America.
Well, no, sort of, yes, Rachel. Nonprofit is defined. Federally tax-exempt purposes are defined in the statute, the relevant 501 statute. They lay out, these are tax-exempt purposes: relief of the poor, education, bump. And this, under the federally tax-exempt statute, this qualified. And in addition, and this is a wrinkle that the Clintons haven't wanted to admit yet, there's a special statute that defines what a presidential archive actually is. Oh. And a presidential archive is not, just anything Bill decides it might be. Records are created during the term of his presidency. Those records are the property of we the people, not Bill Clinton, not Hillary Clinton, not Chelsea Clinton, not anybody else. Those records, once they leave office, can be transferred to this kind of presidential library. But in order for the presidential library to take possession of these records, which are the property of we the people, the presidential library must actually be a lawfully organized and operated charity, which this thing never has been.
Mm. So every president, ends up getting a presidential library, and I'm not sure how far back, but, we've obviously seen the debates, in the Ronald Reagan presidential library. But I guess I just didn't really think of this as being something that the former president themselves has to start a charity to raise money for. Could you go into that a little bit more briefly? I mean, don't we just assume that the president is going to have a historical library?
No. So the way it worked is the first thing is that the Presidential Libraries Act, I believe, was promulgated in 1955. After that point, it was clarified, I believe, in 86 or so. But because when Nixon was forced to resign, there was a question as to, you remember his missing recordings and there was a question as to what constituted presidential records. And we see the similar thing with Hillary Clinton serving as Secretary of State. Are all the emails the property of the people? Are some of them? How do you draw distinctions, et cetera? So the law was clarified, and the statute makes abundantly clear what was supposed to have happened. And the statute also began, the taxpayers began to get concerned about, do we really need a new library for every new president? I mean, after all, there ought to be some benefits of technology. Look at what you can do with Google now. Do you really need a new building complex that needs to be heated and cooled and insured for every president? So the restrictions were tightened. Initially, when Bill did his library, the statute provided that in order for the foundation to be up and running as a foundation and to contribute these papers into the National Archives and Records Administration, which administers these presidential libraries, you had to provide an endowment to the National Archives and Records Administration. Back then, it was 20% of the construction cost.
Okay.
And now, for President Obama, it's 60%.
Huh.
And there's a whole long story we can get into about the Clinton Library. I believe that the Clinton trustees defrauded the National Archives by understating, for the purposes of calculating the endowment, way below the true cost of this foundation. By putting an indefensibly low number in, they kept the endowment to only $7.2 million. They said the library portion was $36 million to the National Archives on November 18th, 2004. But in the books and records that ultimately were created, and I would argue not in compliance with law, that same period, by December 31, 2004, so 6 weeks later, they claimed that the whole complex had cost them $165 million. So how do you say it's $36 million to the National Archives and $165 million in total? That doesn't make any sense.
It's almost counterintuitive in a way, especially in light of like the Nixon tapes and that the president themselves, the former president, would kind of be in charge of maintaining the. Well, I realize what you're saying, that it's actually a national endowment, but I mean, you started this all out that saying those records are the property of the people. Anything that they say while they're in office, any of the tapes, any of their documents should be the property of the people. And so I don't know, it just seems like an easy way for people to go in and kind of clean up after themselves the information that they don't want to get out. So,
right. I mean, and the other thing to just bear in mind here is that I think there are about more than 1 million charities in the United States. And, so the people who get involved with a charity, I bet you both are probably involved. You know people who are involved. They tend to do this charity work without getting paid. They tend to shoulder the expenses. It's not something you do to get rich. Mm-hmm. And the people I know who do a good job about it, they don't want publicity. Right? In the Jewish tradition, I was told last week that you actually can't take credit for charity, that if you do that, some people, the Jewish faith, certain portions of the Jewish faith, think that's not really charity because you're gaining from it. So there are a lot of really good people, millions of people in this country and around the world who do good works. And therefore, there are few examples as egregious as the Clinton case. So, when I have been talking to other people, about this in the past, early on, they would say, well, if what you say is true, how come no one's done anything about it? How come there are examples of other charities that have done this type of stuff? Well, because no one has dared to be this egregious. It's like saying, how come there aren't, more religious leaders who are mass murderers? Well, because you don't get into the mass murdering business if you're a religious leader. And similarly, in charity land, yes, there are fraudsters because a lot of the people who give to charity are gullible, sadly. But and yes, the charity world attracts fraudsters.
Yeah.
But not to the same degree that you might find it in the for-profit world.
I was talking with Rachel beforehand here, and just said, I was not having a good time during the Bush administration. When Clinton came in, it was like all of a sudden I was real busy and working all the time, and I had extra money, and so I was giving money to like Greenpeace and Union of Concerned Scientists. But yeah, it's something that as Americans, as working people, when we're too busy to volunteer ourselves, we just think, well, we're making money, so we do give it out, and we do expect there to be some accountability for where that money is being spent.
So back to the situation. Right, that's right, Rob. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm looking at my notebook. I'm still looking at Little Rock, and it was 64 million that they had put down, but really it came up to 165. And originally they said 36 million, and it went up to 165.
Well, yeah. Let's take this, if we may, in some pieces. So, when you set up a charity, and this one was established first in Little Rock, you have to comply with Arkansas law, which I don't believe they've complied with. They provide no evidence that they've actually complied with Arkansas law. And then when you start fundraising outside your home state, you have to be very careful, because if the fundraising goal is more than a very small amount for a charity, I think it's like $25,000 in New York State, there are really strict rules what you have to tell, New York State and California and Illinois and Minnesota. They all have rules. And what these state regulators care about, particularly in states like New York, where there are high taxes, a lot of rich people and a lot of high income, so there's a lot of possibility to commit fraud. What they care about in the main is that, first of all, the promoters of the charity identify themselves in any deficiencies or defects in their backgrounds. Think, I was impeached, Bill Clinton. I had to surrender my law licenses in Arkansas and before the Supreme Court. Those are serious defects for anybody trying to raise money that would have to be disclosed, and of course were never disclosed. You have to disclose that, and then when you have to tell the state, why are you raising money? You can't come into New York and say, we're raising money for a library, and then spend the money to fly around on chartered jets, in theory, fighting HIV AIDS around the world. You're just not allowed to do that. You can't raise money for an endowment and spend it for operating expenses. And
it's funny you should bring that up about flying around the world and fighting AIDS, because was that happening at around the same time?
They started doing that by January of 2002. Okay. But even before we get there, the other thing you have to do is you have to get your results audited. Now, some of your listeners will likely know the difference between when somebody says audit, you have to be very careful. There are different levels of audit. And some states are very sloppy about laying out what the requirements are. Others, like New York and California, are very strict. But this charity, from the get-go, was required to have an audit, and it never has provided a legally compliant financial audit for any period it has operated since October 23rd, 1997. Not 1 year. They have been passing off work product as being audits, but they are not legally compliant audits. And so,
how do they get away with that?
Again, it's because they figured out that the apparatus, the federal apparatus, has got a lot of Democrat operatives in it, and the IRS and the Department of Justice at federal level have a lot of Democrat operatives in it. Witness the disclosure forms that went out last year in the 2016 election. What percentage of federal employees supported Trump and what supported Hillary Clinton? And then in individual states, New York is a subsidiary of the Democratic Party. California, the same thing. And, and on top of which, none of these states, even New York, which has got, quite a big bureaucracy, none of these states really has the ability to second guess Arkansas and, do the type of detailed work that I've done for free for the last 2 years. Very few states will ever do that. So this thing has grown and grown and grown. Now, to go back to the HIV AIDS thing, what happened was in 2001, on the 18th, I think it was, of January 2001, right, Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich. Okay. And that caused a furor. and actually triggered an FBI investigation we've learned in the last several months, because the FBI Vault website, the official FBI website, has released notes pertaining to their investigation, which started around February 15th, 2002. And the FBI had the ability and did impanel, I believe, 2 different grand juries to look at what really happened. And they should have been able to figure out way back when, what really happened to whatever money may have been raised in this early period, which, if you'll remember, in 2000, a certain Hillary Clinton was running for Senate, and she needed money for that. And so they should have been able back then to get to the bottom of it. But the result of all these investigations and the hubbub and the furor and the transition of George W. Bush was that, the project of raising money for a library, when donors would learn that, any amount above $5,000 and the FBI was going to be all over you to try to figure out whether you'd given money in the run-up to the Mark Rich pardon. So it was tough to get the money raised just for the stated purpose of the Little Rock Library and Research Facility.
Right. When did they actually... I'm sorry, but when did they actually break the ground at Little Rock? Because they started in 97, but Little Rock didn't actually get built till few years later, right? And they didn't even start, I don't think, until I want to say around December of 2002. It might have been 2001 or 2002, and that time is when they broke ground. And the reason for that is the Little Rock project was complicated. What they did is, I believe it was in North Little Rock. It's sort of, you can't make this kind of stuff up, but the portion of Little Rock where the library now sits was in ancient times known as Muddy Waters. That's right. Okay.
And, I swear.
Like a swamp.
And not far
okay.
away from, and not far away from where they ultimately built the structure was actually a pool hall called Slick Willie's that is now, I think, gone.
Perfect.
But anyway,
yeah.
They had to take this derelict property. They had to raise money in a revenue bond, which they did in 1998. There were all kinds of lawsuits about whether the state should actually be using tax revenue for this purpose, and those lawsuits didn't get resolved until, I want to say, 2002. And so it wasn't until around, I want to say, December 6th or 7th, 2002, that they were able to break ground on the facility. And you ask an excellent question. What were they doing with the money? Did they declare all the incoming money that they may have gotten prior to then, is the big question. So with a charity that's run, with poor to non-existent controls, the big question is not what's in the books. The big question is what isn't in the books.
Yeah,
what money was sent in the name of the Clinton Foundation to accounts where the money was, the checks were cashed, but has never been declared. You're going to run a charity this way.
Going to back up just a little bit for something from chat here, and the question is asked in chat: didn't Arkansas Savings and Loan launder $100 million a month for Iran Contra money, and this would be a year after the Gary Webb Dark Alliance? So, I mean, we had a full congressional hearing on this stuff, and yet, what became of it? It all turned into, Monica Lewinsky, which, just buried everything. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, Arkansas, I've only been to Arkansas once. And, Arkansas in finance land has, I would say, a richly deserved reputation, or had in the period where Bill was still there, of being a place where, if you could invest in politicians, and you could get politicians to look the other way and regulate your industry lightly. Witness the chicken farming of the Tyson, witness truckers, witness Walmart, and witness the issuance of all these various and sundry municipal and other types of bond deals, which were put out in the Arkansas via the Arkansas legal apparatus. So yeah, I mean, there was and is, frankly, still a reputation in Arkansas that it's fast and loose down there.
And yet, the congressional hearing, I mean, why did all of this stuff, not come out then? Why couldn't we have started, draining the swamp, or just not let the swamp get so, like you say, muddy waters or whatever? Yeah, I don't understand. We have, we've had full Republican Congresses in the meantime, and yet this stuff just keeps on going on, and it seems to keep getting worse.
Well, yeah, part of the reason could be that, what we have, I think, in this country is we have the emergence of what I call the uniparty. You have the Bush wing of the Republican Party and the Clinton-Obama wing of the Democratic Party, and on certain issues, anything pertaining to do with regulation or crony capitalism issues, they're indistinguishable. They'll say one thing to their respective audiences, but when they go into the back room to get the bills across the line with all the the earmarks and everything else, they'll do another. So it could be that in the period you're talking about, that the Bush 2000 election was obviously hotly contested. We know that the Clintons, because it's a matter of public record, their agents got a whole bunch of FBI files. The ones that we know about are Republican files. We don't know whether they also got Democrat files. And, who knows what sort of leverage the Clintons may have had against the Bushes, against people in the regulatory apparatus. Who knows how many of their acolytes still are working in the federal government and in key judgeships around this country. So the Clintons, even defeated in 2016, still have residual power. And, it's fallen, I believe, to people in your audience and to Donald Trump and his supporters, and really supporters of Bernie Sanders, to finally say, you know what, we ought to have one rule for, frankly, everything, but in the charity world that applies equally, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or apolitical. Charities need to be run for their intended purposes, full stop. Not for politics, not to make yourself rich. And that seems to me to be something that, we should be able all to agree on. And frankly, I find myself on progressive radio a lot. From May of last year, I was on probably progressive radio stations more than anything else.
I bet.
And really, it's people who want to see government disrupted, government, fall to the same realities that we in the private sector have to deal with. The fact that jobs are disappearing, incomes are under threat, costs are rising. Why should government bureaucrats just be allowed to grow and grow and grow, and none of their work is ever challenged? None of their results are ever examined. They're never held accountable. Why is that fair?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the reason for our name here, Shadow Citizen, is that we have noticed that, the uniparty that you spoke of, and how, this class of citizens seems to be above the law. The laws don't apply to them, but they certainly apply to the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Now, I want to go, so we're at Little Rock. We're still talking about Little Rock, and we're talking about maybe $100 million that kind of disappeared. Nobody knows where it is. But then I want to start moving up, because that isn't the long and short of it. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not just about this library anymore. It started growing.
Right. So what happened here, and I'm very squeamish, which makes it difficult for me to talk about health matters, but I've spent a fair amount of time now, and I feel comfortable getting into this whole issue of HIV and AIDS, which obviously, if you go back to the 90s, when Bill was still president, the situation around about 96, the medical community, the established medical community, felt comfortable that by using what are called antiretroviral drugs daily, in a carefully monitored way with real medical attention, so that you could deal with side effects and adjust medications accordingly, that you could actually, that AIDS was being diagnosed as HIV positive was no longer a death sentence, medically speaking, because these antiretrovirals would prolong your life long enough so that you'd likely die of other causes than the progression of HIV into full-blown AIDS. That was the good news in 96. But the bad news was that those drugs were patent protected, and they cost about $10,000, roughly $10,000 per year, putting them way out of the reach of the majority of people around the world who it was thought might have HIV. So that was the original theory, and that got the scientific and political world and popular imagination inflamed with the notion that we needed to migrate and make these drugs available at the lowest possible cost wherever we could around the world. So there was almost, you look at it in history, it was almost a pell-mell rush to get this job accomplished. Now, there are some pretty good statistics on all this. And one of them that I was shocked to see is that the number of initially shocked, the number of the physicians, licensed physicians in this country and in the Western countries is typically for every 100,000 people in the West, in Japan, places like that. You could say round numbers are 2,500 to 3,000 physicians on average. And of course, in the West, we have electricity everywhere. We have roads. We have transportation systems. And actually, in the West, the statistics suggest that most of our people live in cities. Mm-hmm. So it is possible to treat these patients efficiently in a Western context. Now, you compare that to Africa, certain nations in Africa. There's no electricity. There are no paved roads. There are no physicians. Where I said there are 2,500 to 3,000 physicians, in the West. In Ethiopia, from memory, for every 100,000 people, there's 60 physicians.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So you can't just, this isn't like taking. Well, actually, aspirin is dangerous as well. But this isn't like taking, something that's a trivial medicine that has, minimal side effects. You give these certain types of antiretroviral drugs to somebody who has a liver condition or has, some other problems, and they don't take the medicine regularly, or for some reason the medicine isn't stored properly, you could kill these people with this medicine. So it wasn't clear that just, sending boxes of this medicine around the world to places where there were no health systems was the smartest thing to do. Now, anyway, what happened is Ira Magaziner, by January of 2002, according to an excellent book written by a left-wing author, Joe Conason, but very well written. It's quite chatty. It goes into great detail what really happened. Obviously, Conason had access to the Clinton team and to Magaziner, but Ira Magaziner ends up basically taking charge of what they called initially the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative. Mm-hmm. But there are no records in the public domain for the activities of this entity from when it started around January 2002 until March 24th, 2004. There are no records at all. And you're not allowed to do that.
They sort of just did that with their Clinton Foundation library. They went a few years without doing anything. So now they sort of did the same thing. There's no records of anything. Stuff's going on. Bill Clinton's marching around the planet, though, raising money for this initiative, this AIDS charity, right? Right.
And what he did is he started. The thing about it that's kind of amazing is that Bill has written quite a few different books, and maybe he lied in his own books plural, but he admits exactly how he did this. He says that it started by July of 2002. Other books say it started as early as June 2002. But there are multiple press releases. You're the former president of the United States. You're on a topic like HIV/AIDS at a moment where the world and still deeply cares about this topic. There's a mountain of evidence in the public domain that I've been organizing that shows he was centrally involved, raising hundreds of millions of dollars from governments, claiming that he was doing so in the name of the Clinton Foundation when he was not even an officer or a director or an employee of the Clinton Foundation, or even a named agent of the Clinton Foundation, nor was Magaziner. Okay. And you're not allowed to do that. If U.S. charities must be controlled tightly from a U.S. base, and right. If you're going to change your purpose, you got to change it in the Articles of Incorporation of your legal document. They've never done that, and you have to register it.
So did they actually start another foundation called the Clinton AIDS Charity, or there was nothing? They were just called
until they just started calling their effort the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. Uh-huh. It is possible that they formed a charity in the Bahamas in 2002. We're getting mixed signals. I've sent people down to the Bahamas to try to get documents, and we're close to actually getting these. But by March 24th, 2004, they did form a new entity called Clinton Foundation HIV AIDS Initiative, Inc. in Arkansas.
Okay.
And they may have filed this Form 1023 that I told you about earlier in the broadcast, but that's a document that the public has every right to see, which is not in the public domain. And my suspicion is that they were turned down in that in their request to form that entity because they had failed to disclose these activities we were talking about from 2002 to March 23rd, 2004. You are not allowed to start a charity first and file your application later. Otherwise the IRS would have no control, right?
Right.
So you have to
and this
form your
isn't just,
corporation.
Yeah, and this just isn't just like the maybe 35 million for this library anymore. Now we're talking about millions and millions of dollars from governments. Like I heard you talking about Ireland gave 110 million euro, and Norway gave 25 million euro, 25 million from Canada, and Switzerland.
And also,
Switzerland gives 650 million, and it's not accounted
Australia,
for. Yeah.
And Australia, another 100. So yeah, I mean, the other thing, you raise a good point here. So the individual state forms, California is very strict, New York's very strict, require you to list out every single donation by a government to a charity. Now, why is that important? Governments, there's a lot of talk about how the Russians may have been trying to influence this election. Mm-hmm. Governments can get to politicians by making contributions to their charities. And as an example of this, John McCain, who's very much critical of Trump, has a charity called the McCain Institute. Mm-hmm. And there's something called the McCain Institute Foundation. And in their most recent filing, John McCain, who's chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, has not connected the dots on his Senate forms to explain why the government of Saudi Arabia, through its Washington, D.C. embassy, gave the McCain Institute $1 million out of the 1.7 or 8 that they made in 2014. That's a very significant donation, which our state forms in New York and in California would cause you to actually explain. And so similarly, the Clinton Foundation, the concern was and is that governments who are barred from financing, intervening in political campaigns would get around that loophole by making large donations to a foundation. And so the public has a right to know when this happens. And of course, the Clintons have refused to comply with that rule.
And on top of
comply with the state, even
right. And on top of all this AIDS charity that Switzerland gave 650 million to, which from what I heard you say, 100 million are not accounted for. I also heard you talking about how the drugs themselves were not even legit.
Yeah, and this is really serious stuff. And so we've been having a lot of people look into this. I was successful. There's a wonderful congressperson in Tennessee named Marsha Blackburn who their staff became aware of my work. And so we had meetings in Washington, several meetings, and they issued a report last year precisely on this topic. There is a diabolical company that still exists called Ranbaxy, Ranbaxy. And in India, obviously a lot of people in India, they have different rules about health and patents. And there's a gigantic pharmaceutical industry in India. Now, back in 2001-2 timeframe, the Indian stock market was still very small. It had only begun the country to transition from socialism towards capitalism around about 95, 96. So their stock market had yet to take off. And this company, Ranbaxy, had actually been around for a while. It had relatively small market value. But they saw very quickly, in part because they were dealing with this unbelievable crook, Rajat Gupta, who was the chairman of McKinsey. McKinsey was at that time working for Ranbaxy, helping them think through how they become a gigantic company. And of course, separately, Rajat Gupta, as it turns out, was paying off the Clinton family from 2002 to 2008 through a vehicle called MindSpirit LLC. This is a matter of public record.
Okay.
And lo and behold, Ranbaxy ended up signing agreements with the Clinton Foundation, one in October of 2003, when the Clinton Foundation had no right to sign such an agreement in India, promoting the sale of Ranbaxy drugs. They sign that agreement. They don't tell the governments exactly the nature of these agreements. There's a clear conflict of interest. I mean, on many levels, you're not lawfully organized to do this work. You signed an agreement with a drug supplier. Who knows how Ira Magazine and others may have been compensated by that drug supplier. And now you're going to urge governments to buy these Ranbaxy drugs. Well, come August of 2004, and Ranbaxy is on record as having provided drugs through the Clinton Foundation to these various governments in the Caribbean and Africa, et cetera. The government of South Africa contacts Ranbaxy and says, get your boys from India down here to South Africa immediately. We have a serious problem. An investigation is started, and before long, a man who ultimately becomes a whistleblower realizes that until August of 2004, not a single pill manufactured by Ranbaxy, it's a big company, not one of those pills had been tested validly. They've been faking. They've been faking their test results. They've been sending people. I mean, there's a story actually. It's so sad. It's funny, but there's a story called "Dirty Medicine" in Fortune magazine. I would encourage your audience to read it and really care about this. They talk about how this company would send, when they needed a test result to come in positive, they'd tell an executive in the United States to go buy a brand name version of the drug and fly it over in a briefcase and then put it in the test lab. And they had a special room in one of these facilities where they would steam paper to make it age and look. It was just this incredible.
That's
fraud.
like something out of a movie. That's like, yeah.
Well, it should be a movie. It should be a movie. And then this is the one that's really going to get people's blood pressures rising. But in the Dirty Medicine article, it claims that when the executives went up the chain to make their finding and say, we really need to change all this, to the CEO of Ranbaxy, the CEO is quoted as saying, why do you care about all this? All we're doing is killing black people in Africa.
Oh, my gosh.
It's in the article.
Oh, my gosh.
It's in the article. So you read this. When I saw that, that article, actually, that's when I said, I'm going to make this a crusade, because this is just not right. It is not right to do this kind of behavior. It is not right. You're the former president of the United States. You're the aspiring president of the United States. Your name is on the door of this foundation. You've been taking credit around the world for all the good work you've been doing. In fact, you haven't been doing good work. You may actually have been killing people.
Right.
And we need to get to the bottom of what's really happened here.
So now that was going on, and fast forward to like closer to now, then we've got Haiti, the disaster. So that's India. Now we've got the disaster in Haiti. Wait, back to Mackenzie. Is that the same place that Chelsea Clinton worked?
Exactly right.
All right. So there you go. There's a connection. All right. So now moving out of India, we're going over to Haiti. Haiti, we've got what do we got? 10 minutes left in our whole time here. Yeah. I don't know how we can get this across to people, because this thing is starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's no longer just a few million over in Arkansas. Now we're dealing with literally millions. We're getting into the billions part.
I wanted just to add one little thing here, and that's, vaccine companies or pharmaceutical companies are notorious for dumping their leftover product, at regular price in third world countries. So, this is outrageous, of course, that a former president is involved with it, but it's also something that, once again, is kind of systemic through the pharmaceutical industry. So now we can move on to Haiti, but I wanted to get that in.
What you just said is true. Like, for instance, Costa Rica, they now use all these different vaccines for kids that they never used to do. But when America got rid of the thimerosal and the vaccines for the kids, they sent them all down to Costa Rica, and they're still using them in Costa Rica. Yeah, but anyhow, continue with our.
Yeah, well, see, this is another area where, for example, I can agree with Bernie Sanders. I mean, I've spent a fair amount of time in India. I was on the board of a company over there, and my last time there, I was there for 3 months in a row. There is every reason why we should be able to get the prices of drugs down. Healthcare in this country typically involves, once you get a condition, taking pills for the rest of your life. And so it's critically important. I mean, obviously, you need to encourage people to innovate and all that. But, the prices of drugs should not be so crazily high as they are now here in this country versus the rest of the world. There's got to be a way to crack through that. Now, in the case of Haiti, there is a wonderful human being. Her name is Dady and then Chery, Dottie Cherry. If you look her up, she is a biologist by training, but she's also a journalist, and she's from Haiti. She's written exhaustively about this. She's helped educate me. But the bottom line here is that the Clintons have been pillaging Haiti for decades. Mm-hmm. And Haiti is a place that just cannot seem to catch a break. I was listening to a broadcast this morning about it that, we had our revolution in 1776, 1789, and we won freedom for most people. Haiti in 1804 won freedom for everybody. And, there's a long tortured history in Haiti, various and sundry foreign interests exploiting that country. But if we fast forward to January, I think it was 18th, 2010, when the earthquake hit Haiti. It had its share of problems right before then, I think in 2008 as well. But Bill Clinton, by this time, was special envoy to Haiti, and he got himself made the co-chairman of the Interim Haiti Recovery Committee, which Dottie jokes is actually IHRC, stand for I, Hillary Rodham Clinton. But anyway, they used the earthquake to launch fundraising appeals. Different estimates are out there, some as low as $9.5 billion, others as high as $14 billion for money that went towards Haiti. Right. But less than 3% of that has actually arrived inside Haiti. And no one knows what's really happened, and Bill Clinton refuses to account for any of this. So, Haiti is a case in point where, when Hillary was on the campaign trail last year, she would talk about how, if they were elected, Bill would revitalize the American economy. And I would always fire back, you mean the way he revitalized Haiti?
Oh, my God.
I mean, Haiti is still falling down. No roads, no doctors, no electricity. They managed under the through Clinton intercession, to turn Haiti, a country which made its own rice, to, guess what, a country that imports its rice from where? Southeastern Arkansas.
No.
They entered, yep, and it's now dependent on that. They've gone, under the Clintons, using Cheryl Mills. Cheryl Mills apparently was in league with a Korean textile manufacturer who now backs her in this thing called Black Ivy. But they decided that they'd use Haiti as a sweatshop. So the Clintons have been keeping, moved textile manufacturing into Haiti at, 30 to 50 cent an hour wages in processes that pollute the water. This is just disgusting.
It is disgusting, it's especially considering all this, the chatter and stuff you hear about Pizzagate and Pediogate, and how I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard this a lot, that the Clinton Foundation or somebody associated with the Clinton Foundation was involved in human trafficking. And there was a woman was down there trying to investigate this, and she ended up dead. And so that's kind of a weird thing too.
Yeah, no, I know nothing about, I'm not an expert on human trafficking, and obviously that's horrible. But I have not personally investigated that side of the story, but I can tell you, just on the stuff I have investigated that's up on my website. By contrast, there's an African-American congressman who lost election in a special election last November. She had served in Congress for more than 20 years, who was indicted during the summer last year over an $800,000 slush fund. This is a Democrat woman, African-American woman, indicted by the Obama Justice Department, facing 357 years in federal prison for $800,000 over 3, 4, 5 years. Now, the Clinton Foundation, in its declared books, is more than $2 billion. We're going on now 20 years. Tough, really, when you think about the allied frauds, Haiti, the Global Fund, other places, you can very quickly get up into the 100 billion. Then you think about deals that have been done, concocted out of this mess illegally. You can easily get into the trillions. And, this to me is something that you're trying to drain the swamp. All you have to do here is apply the laws that are on the books to the facts that the FBI and others can ferret out here if they roll up their sleeves.
But why aren't they? But why aren't they, Charles? Why won't they? Is this just too big? It touches too many sides of... I mean, we're talking $1 trillion. That's a lot.
I think in part the reason, I mean, think about it, we still have, I'm amazed that the current head of the IRS is that guy, John Koskinen, who late last year, the House was trying to impeach him. And for some reason, he's still there. The critical person in the IRS over charities was actually Lois Lerner. There's a tax-exempt organizations department is what she headed. And that's the group that sits on top of all this. I mean, you have back on Haiti. In 2010, the largest grant of the Clinton Foundation was to the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund. And they filed their tax forms for 2010 and 2011. Then they had to amend them in 2015 for 2010. And they repeated this error twice, and it's a flagrant error. Largest grant, $37.2 million, is to the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund at a post office box in Baltimore, Maryland. Only that's not its address. Its address is in Washington, D.C. In addition, roughly $3.4 million was supposedly sent in vehicles and clothes to a post office box in Maryland. Well, how do you do that? And how do you operate this Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund in Haiti without any Haitian bank accounts, which is what they declare on their tax forms?
I remember during the primaries about the Haitian ambassadors, saying, you have to do something, Mr. Trump, about the Clintons. They've stole all the money that was meant to go to Haiti.
Yeah, I remember seeing that too, Rob.
And but in the meantime, we've got 2 minutes left. So, Charles, once again, what's the work, all the stuff that you've uncovered? Do you have backers that are going to help you bring this into some sort of court? Or move the investigation further, or how can we help you?
We help you? Yeah.
Well, thanks for giving me airtime. If you follow me on Twitter at Charles Ortel, that's great. I'm not looking for backers or seeking any kind of financial help here. But you live in different states. The notion that the Attorney General of Rhode Island would do anything about this is laughable. But
we just got a new one. We just got a new one. Not that I liked the old one a real lot, but this new one might do something.
Is the new one a Republican or a Democrat?
I'm not sure. I know he had to step in because the last one was a Democrat.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we need to raise the pressure on this attorneys general. If you have friends who know attorneys general, I know in Minnesota actually has been very helpful to me. They just recently sent me. They have excellent people in their attorney general charity bureau office. But I'm publicizing this and hoping that there'll be turnover at the IRS. There has been some turnover at the Department of Justice. I have been pushing on different states and foreign countries to make progress, and everybody's sort of waiting to see what Trump's going to do.
Yeah, I am too.
That is the big question, because he does seem to have, after he had that 90-minute meeting with Obama, he just seems to everybody, we got to throw her in jail, and then since then, let her go home and heal, or as I say, let her go home and steal. Anyway, we're at the end of the show here. Thanks, Charles, so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it.
Welcome to Shadow Citizen with Rachel McIntosh and Rob Ortel.